Quoting President Trump, the war with Iran will end soon because there is practically nothing left to target. And yet, Israel's military says the war will last, quote, as long as necessary. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman in studio, the Iran war, the so-called Save America Act, and the continued legislative standoff over DHS funding. Also on the war, rising gas prices and what may come next. Two prominent House voices, Adam Smith, Washington Democrat, Don Bacon, Nebraska Republican. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. For those of you watching, yes, today was haircut day. For you podcast listeners, when it comes to my hair, I'll just let your imagination run wild. All right, back to the show. When we have a lineup, a big lineup of lots of newsmakers, you know what I do. I just get out of the way. Tonight, John Fetterman, the only Democratic voice in the Senate, backing President Trump's decision to go to war with Iran. He joins us to explain why he thinks that the war, on balance, is going well. He also tells us how he wants to fund the Department of Homeland Security and why he opposes Trump's near obsession with the so-called Save America Act. Also tonight, Adam Smith, the ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, he opposes the war in Iran and wants Congress much more involved than it currently is in the ongoing war policy. And Republican Don Bacon of Nebraska, generally supportive of Trump's war aims, but he's uncertain, as many House Republicans find themselves, about how this war ends, the direction of oil prices, and future inflation complications. Also, we have exclusive CBS News reporting on just how many U.S. military personnel were injured and how badly they were injured in the March 1st Iranian drone attack in Kuwait that killed 6 U.S. service members. Plus, we take a long look at world oil prices, domestic supplies, and the near-term future of gas prices. It is a very full plate here on The Takeout. We start tonight with Matt Gutman in Tel Aviv. Matt, take it away.
Major, I think what we're starting to see right now is the Iranian strategy crystallizing, right? For the first 11 days of the war, it seemed like they were sort of scattered, targeting these 14 countries, mainly in the Persian Gulf, those Arab states, its neighbors. Now they're really going after the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and putting the squeeze on oil. And today was a watershed day. You know, they hit 3 ships passing through the straits. One of them was hit by some sort of projectile. We believe it was a suspected drone that gouged a massive hole in the hull of this tanker. It's sitting in the narrowest part of the Strait of Hormuz right now, still smoking. Apparently, the crew had to be evacuated. We're not sure yet if there were people wounded. That was a major scale up and escalation by Iran. They also hit a fuel depot in Oman, causing a massive fire. They threatened Dubai's financial sector as well. And the Iranian regime said that not a drop of oil will pass through the Strait of Hormuz. They also said to expect $200 a barrel for oil. And maybe a few days ago, that would have sounded like hyperbole. It does not sound like hyperbole anymore. And right now, it does not seem that the United States has a ready answer, because effectively, Iran has blocked off the Straits of Hormuz. Excuse me.
And you heard, I believe, Matt, when I talked to the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, I asked him about the Strait of Hormuz, and he said that there would be this concerted effort, U.S. and Israeli, to degrade the Iranian Navy and limit their ability to harass any vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, it sounds like they are harassing vessels in the Strait of Hormuz.
They're attacking vessels. Yeah, it's even more than harassing. It's unclear what caused one of these ships to be debilitated, stranded, adrift at the very narrowest part. Could have been a mine, could have been something else. We simply don't know right now. But this is seriously taking it up another notch. The question is, how much does it actually take? Iran is able to prosecute this war with very little. There have been just a few incoming missiles towards Israel today, but that is enough to essentially shut down the country. The economy is on standby. Schools are off. Nothing is happening. There's almost no traffic, and that is pervasive through the entire region. The economy is essentially shut down, and they don't have to be able to fire that many offensive weapons to be able to do that. That is what is astounding, the sort of minimalism of this approach by Iran, that even though they are getting hammered so hard, it doesn't take that much to grind the economies to a halt and to really stop the flow of oil, fertilizer, gas, and other products through the Straits of Hormuz, that absolutely critical choke point for so much commerce in the world that is very clearly going to have a significant impact on the world economy very, very soon, Major.
Matt Gutman, always appreciate it. Thank you, sir. CBS News national security correspondent Charlie Daggett joins me now. Charlie, you and two of our colleagues put together the reporting on what happened March 1st in Kuwait. Tell us what we know.
Well, Major, first of all, we have to point out that this is the first serious Iranian retaliation. And why Kuwait? Kuwait's very close to Iran, within reaching distance to drones. We've talked about it a lot, reported about the drones in striking distance, and it looks like a drone strike on this base, or not base, actually, another U.S. military facility in Kuwait. There may be questions about the protection over that area, but this is the place where we've reported the first U.S. fatalities there. And at first, we heard that there were 3 fatalities, then we heard a 4th, and then a couple days later, we were starting to hear about the 5th and the 6th. Part of that meant that they had to get the 6th casualty, pardon the expression, from some of the rubble to rescue that person or retrieve that person's body from the rubble, which gives an indication of how extreme this drone strike was. Now, there were dozens of people that were injured in that as well. We're learning that many of them had to be evacuated to Landstuhl in Germany, dozens, as a matter of fact. Most of them have been treated. I've learned today, in speaking to Central Command, officials from Central Command, that they have returned to the battlefield because there was a lot of TBI, concussions, traumatic brain injuries, a lot of shrapnel wounds, not necessarily major wounds or life-threatening wounds, but it gives you an idea of the scale of that initial drone attack, the largest attack in this region against U.S. forces in Kuwait. And there were other attacks. Saudi Arabia, there's another fatality reported there. But this is the first one. It was a major one, and it has raised questions about the level of defense or what they could expect or defended against Iranian drones.
Right, because this raises the question about general force protection, where the forces are, how well you can reinforce them, how well they can be notified to seek shelter if they need to. All those things are now at high alert.
Yes, exactly. Because to paint the picture of this region and where there is force protection, which, by the way, is the #1 priority. It's not just the attacks or projected attacks against Iran, but how Iran may retaliate. And yes, we call them HESCOs. These are the outside exterior defenses that are put in place in places like Al Udeid, et cetera. But when you're looking at swarms, and I use that word specifically, swarms of Iranian drones, missile attacks, et cetera. You're looking at the proximity and the length of time between a drone being launched or a missile being launched and the alarm systems that we've heard, you just heard from Matt, of when we can expect incoming. When you're that close to Iran and you're attacking military installations in places like Bahrain, which they have, places like Kuwait, which has really borne the brunt of most of the Iranian attacks there, there's not much time to get down and get shelter. And when you got something coming in from the top, dropping in, this isn't an attack coming from the outside of a base, but dropping in from the top of a base, that is something that the U.S. military, spoke to them today, they're constantly reassessing that threat and what they can do to protect forces in this region.
And to try to mitigate those threats. Charlie Daggett, excellent reporting. Thank you very much. Earlier today, I spoke with Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman on how he views the state of the war and a lot of other topics. Please listen. You support President Trump's decision to launch this war with Iran. How do you think it's going?
Well, I think, first, I think it makes me the only Democrat in the Senate that supports that, perhaps maybe even in the entire Congress. So, but yes, that's true. And I think overall, what's accomplished is remarkable. And I would like to remind everybody listening that every single Democratic presidential candidate, and every single Democrat that I'm aware of, demands to make sure that Iran could never acquire a nuclear weapon. And it's very clear that was their ambition, and also developing a missile technology to make it possible to deliver those kinds of weapons to Israel for sure, and perhaps even eventually our country. And everything's tried. Multiple presidents through their administrations have tried this. Negotiation, treaties, all other kinds of techniques to work through our allies in the region and cajole them. No incentives. So it made that a fact necessary, I think. Kamala Harris, while she was running for president, she identified Iran as her top concern, internationally, her top concern. And so when someone does that, it happens to be a very polarizing figure in the Democratic Party to produce that outcome that we all would want. Now, that's why I think it's reasonable to support that. Now, I'm also aware of how punishing it is as a Democrat to agree with him on anything. Certainly.
The president.
Yeah, the president. And so I think whether that's country over party or the kinds of world security where we're at, and remind people as well that what's happened since that started, it's been a dramatic impact on the Iranians' ability to essentially even respond at this point.
So you think it's going well, the war?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure it's the right word I would choose for war, but I do think it's very effective, and I do think it's moving towards the kinds of appropriate outcome.
As we're speaking today, the president told Axios there's practically nothing left to target in Iran, and the war will end, direct quote, soon. Does that sound good to you?
I mean, I'm sure there are some things, but it's also undeniable that Iran really never had the kind of capabilities to respond. Since it started, it's been 10 days. 10 days,
12th day.
12 days. I think if they really have a shot to shoot, they probably would have done it by now. And now they had to resort to targeting other nations in the region, and to try to disrupt some of the oil trade, and that's happening. But overall, they've been unable to inflict any significant damage on American assets or in Israel at this.
Let me talk to you about the standoff over DHS funding, Department of Homeland Security. Nicole Skanga, one of my colleagues, reported that since the shutdown began of DHS funding, 300 TSA officers have quit. There are lots of longer lines at airports.
Actually, I didn't know that. I didn't know 300.
300 have quit just since the shutdown began. That's going to make it harder to refill those. It takes 4 to 6 months. Long lines are getting longer. How does this end?
Yeah, well, I travel and I fly through the airport virtually every week of the year. And just last week, actually, this was filmed. I asked every agent that I encountered, hey, do you like getting paid to work? Shockingly, they all agreed, yeah, that's great to do that. And I said, well, I'm the one Democrat, again, to be the one guy to refuse to do that. How can you be a Democrat that says, let's make some reform on ICE? We all agree. Minneapolis was a disaster. That should never have ever happened. In fact, later today, this is being filmed. I'm going to have an opportunity to sit down with Senator Mullen, who's going to be the next director of DHS.
Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma.
Yeah, exactly. My friend and someone that I respect, and I do believe that he could be the kind of person that I could work with. Now, just remind, America signed up for secure our border, focus and deport all the criminals, and no more tragedies like in Minneapolis, and to make those kinds of appropriate reforms. So I'm not sure why that's more difficult to be a Democrat, because I feel, to me, that it's doesn't feel unreasonable to say that not punish people like TSA agents and the Coast Guard and other people that were not involved in any of
But
it.
you know, votes have to be found. How are votes going to be found to get this spending approved?
For the war, if there's
No, for DHS funding to end this.
of course, yeah. I've been the only one to.
Right, but how do you get your Democratic colleagues to change?
I don't know. I can't speak for them, but we can all agree that it would have no impact on ICE or the kinds of reforms that we all agree. It just, I mean, it's illogical to punish innocent people that were not involved on the tragedy of Minneapolis that triggered it. So that's make impossible to allow two things to be true to coexist.
What is your feeling about the president's emphasis, hard emphasis, on the so-called Save America Act?
Well, there's a couple truths embedded in this conversation too. I don't support, in its current state, to vote Save America, and the president is constantly critical on mail-in voting, and that's ridiculous. It's safe. Some of the best examples in the country are from red states like Ohio and Florida, of course. And now I have a unique perspective on that too, as in 2019, as I was lieutenant governor, the Republicans in Pennsylvania pushed for mail-in voting. They forced us to give up the straight party line. That was one of two states in the country at that time, because that's what they wanted. And then immediately the president decided that's wrong. Then now they had to walk back and explain why unanimously every single Republican voted for that in 2019. So that's why I can't ever vote for that, because I could never agree something that's just not true. Now, there's also another truth that I believe 83% of Americans think that it's reasonable to show ID to vote. And many, many states already do those things. Exactly. And I cite what happened in the Wisconsin election last year. And they elected a very liberal justice for the Supreme Court, but they also nearly 2-1 voted to put that in the Constitution, show basic ID to vote. The world did spin off the axis, and I think we could agree they're going to have a safe there. So if the Republicans would ever just make it showing basic state ID to vote, hey, I'm not going to tell 83% of Americans that they're wrong or that they are Jim Crow people. That's that. And also the reason why the SAVE Act will never pass, because the filibuster. But including myself, we all ran in 22 to get rid of the filibuster, deliver it. But now we find ourselves as Democrats, we love the filibuster. We cling to that. So that's other part of there. So if someone, I tried to buy a wine at, if anyone familiar with Sheetz, and they're like, no. I'm like, they even knew who I was. And they're like, well, no ID. I didn't have any ID. So I walked away empty pockets. Showing ID, the vast majority of Americans, everyone should have one. Why, I think many people should realize that, that's basic to participate in so many parts of American society. And now most states, including mine, has a free state ID. And if they do make it mandatory, then every state should also mandate to have free, basic
that meet the requirement of voting.
Exactly.
The president, at the direction of the president, this version in the Senate also has some transgender amendments. Mm-hmm. Are those problematic to you?
For me, like I've always been a Democrat that refuses to kind of pick on or signal out that community. I was the first person elected in Pennsylvania back in 2013. If you remember, it was illegal. Same-sex marriage was illegal. And the governor at that time threatened to arrest me if I performed or solemnized a same-sex marriage, and I did that. And I'm like, hey, they know where I live, and I believe in that kinds of equality. And that entire community now, I refuse to target that or pick on that. It's difficult enough for transgenders kids. So I think this is the wrong venue to discuss it nationally, make it global, and further kinds of drag them into this kinds of things. So I think it's a very personal choice for parents and their children about it. And then I think it's increasingly going to become a more local or maybe state kinds of decisions.
Does it feel to you that the president's jamming those two issues into this legislation in order to amplify the politics?
Well, yeah, of course. They're trying to make it more like a statement. So, you know, as a Democrat, I'm making a statement, but I think it's pretty reasonable and something we could agree. Now, if he wants something that has a chance of passing, or he could make a more cogent argument, make it just a basic, straight, basic fundamental state ID. Or can you explain why voting by mail is corrupt or problematic? Well, then you're actually criticizing many of your own states and many of your own constituents that use that.
And the way you were reelected.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. And also, you damage your own credibility when you have no problem with the election if you win, but the only time you have a problem or where it's like if you didn't. He had no problem with it in 2016. I don't recall him ever being upset, and certainly everybody. He never had a problem with the outcome in 24. So that's where we are.
That was the news of the day, part of my conversation with Senator Fetterman. We had a much longer conversation, much of it about his book, Unfettered, in which he speaks with great rawness and candor about his struggle with clinical depression. For that interview, you can catch it on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, and I recommend it to you highly. Still to come, Republican Congressman Don Bacon and Democrat Adam Smith. Plus, 32 nations decide to release 400 million barrels of oil in a bid to stabilize supplies and slow the spike in gas prices. Will that work? The head of the American Petroleum Institute joins us. And first was Georgia, now Arizona, the latest state to find itself at the center of election investigations. We take a look at what's going on there. The Takeout returns, I'm happy to say, in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Takeout. I want to bring in Republican Congressman from Nebraska, Don Bacon. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee. Been on the show many times before. Congressman, good to see you. Let me start with what I started with Senator Fetterman. How do you think the war is going, and what's got you nervous?
Well, first of all, I enjoyed hearing the interview. I agree with the senator on almost like 80 or 90% of the issues. So that was a great interview. I think the war is going well. This war is high risk. It's unpredictable like every war. But I think it was long overdue. We had Iran killing Americans since 1979. 241 people in the Beirut barracks, 19 people at Khobar Towers. One of my friends was in that tower that died there. When I was in Iraq, Iran proxy groups targeted us every single day for a year. On a good day, 3 missiles. On a bad day, like 30 missiles would hit our position. So I think it was overdue. I think the effects of the operations have been superb. I think it's very unfortunate and terrible that school got hit, and it was done by accident. I think obviously it was not intentional, but things happen in war, fog and friction in war. I mean, we also had three F-15s shot down by Kuwait by accident. These things happen in war. I think the overall goal is to get a new regime, a government that represents the people and that wants to have friendly relations with its neighbors. It doesn't want a nuclear weapon. That is our goal.
How do you achieve that, Congressman? Because the regime has named a new supreme leader and doesn't appear to be in the mind of budging.
It appears this new leader is gravely injured already, though I don't have confirmation. That's some of the reports that I'm hearing. It is hard to get a regime change doing air operations only, but we don't want boots on the ground. So this is a high risk. It's unpredictable, as I already mentioned, but we need to keep targeting the regime and keep targeting its ability to repress their own people. And we need to go after the military stuff that can reach out and target our ships, target the oil tankers in the straits, or hit our local area bases. So that's what we're seeing. We're going after the regime. We're going after the military so they can strike back. And I think we got to continue to do it until the military decides it does not support the government anymore. And when that happens, then the people will take over.
Congressman, you know me well enough to know that I don't ask lawmakers about every random tweet that comes across the transom, but Andy Ogles has gotten a lot of attention this week, and I want to read to you two things he posted on his own official site. Quote, Muslims are unable to assimilate. They all have to go back. That's yesterday. Monday, Muslims don't belong in American society. Pluralism is a lie. Do you have any reaction to those?
I don't like it. I want to be respectful to everybody that citizens in our country are here legally. And we know the lion's share of most Muslims are peaceful. They're active citizens. I see them all the time, particularly when I'm in Washington, D.C. And we should be against the terrorists or those who are radicalized and talk about that. But let's not group a whole religion together. First of all, it's our First Amendment right to worship the way we want to worship. Secondly, it's in the Constitution that you can't have a litmus test for any kind of religion for becoming a citizen or becoming an office holder or having a job in the federal government. And that's what we should defend. In the end, let's be respectful to everybody. And if you want to talk about Islam, focus on those who are radicalized or those who are doing terrorism, but not the 99% who want to be good citizens and live in our country.
Congressman, the administration is making it pretty clear that it's going to come to the Congress sometime in the not too distant future with a supplemental funding request for this war. Could be as high as $50 billion, could be higher than that. You comfortable with that?
Yes, if they could detail the cost, but I support the war, though I know that's risk. There's risk involved and it's unpredictable. We've already seen some of that. But this war was way overdue. I remember talking to General Odierno, the 4-star general in Central Command. So why are we not going after Iran? They're killing Americans like every week when I was in Iraq. And he said, we're not allowed to by the president. That was President Bush and then President Obama. This was overdue. It had to be done. And, and I hope it could get wrapped up shortly so that we can get things back to normal. But it had to happen.
Do you agree with Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, Republican, who said yesterday, if the regime remains, this is not a war that can end? Or words to that effect.
I hate to make things totally, black or white, because at some point we're going to have to decide how much what we want to spend if the regime does not change. So we're going to have to make those decisions as we go. But here's the problem: if we still have the Ayatollah in charge, and I hear he's gravely injured, but if they put someone else in charge that's like him, they're still going to develop a nuclear weapon. They're still going to target Americans. And our problem, they may be weakened. It may be several years before they can recover, but the problem will still be there. And I think that's what Senator Graham is saying. The success in this war will be if we get a government that represents the people, wants peace with its neighbors, and does not want a nuclear weapon.
Congressman Don Bacon, Republican, Nebraska. I appreciate the time, sir, as always. Thank you. Up next, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Washington Democrat Adam Smith. You see him right there. He's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Joined now by Washington Democratic Congressman Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. For the purposes of symmetry, let me ask the question I've asked my two previous guests. How is the war going, and what are you most worried about?
Yeah, I don't think it's going great. There's sort of three ways of looking at it. One is, how are we doing at degrading Iran's ability to wage war and with their missile capacity, their drone capacity? There, I think, we're making some solid progress. We don't have specific numbers on it. Connected to that was a desire to destroy their capacity to rebuild. That we don't really have any information on. So however much we're destroying their capabilities, destroying their Navy, their Air Force, their missiles, they've been attacked before. They could rebuild. But then there's the other two pieces to this, and Representative Bacon alluded to this. Supposedly, the goal of this war isn't just to degrade Iran, it's to permanently change them. And on that front, we seem to be making no progress whatsoever. The hardline elements seem to be firmly in place. and willing to fight this out for as long as possible and rebuild. And there doesn't seem to be any plan on our end to change that. And then third, there's the collateral damage. We have a region now, I think it's somewhere around 14 countries have been dragged into this one way or another. We've lost 7 U.S. service members. A number of civilians have been killed. We've had the tragic killing of over 150 people in that girls' school in an unintentional strike. The global economy is teetering. Price of oil is skyrocketing, and the entire global economy is being disrupted. So the costs are high and the benefits are not as great as I think some people have said because they don't really have much permanence to them.
Let me ask you what I asked the defense secretary last Friday. Is it possible to obtain the objectives President Trump has laid out and identified about the future of Iran's nuclear program without ourselves or in concert with the Israelis identifying and extracting the known quantities, about 950 pounds at least, of highly enriched uranium?
Yeah, it seems unlikely. And even then, also, again, you have to block their capacity to rebuild it. It's not that hard to build centrifuges, sadly, and it's not that hard to enrich uranium. But that's the other interesting aspect of this attack. To date, we've received no reports that their nuclear program has been struck at all, even as we have President Trump saying that, gosh, they were weeks away from being able to build a bomb. Absurdly, at one point, he said they would have used it already. So we don't really have any insight on how we're weakening their nuclear program. And yeah, it's pretty well impossible to do that from the air. I've been in these briefings for like 15 years now as we've examined options to take out their nuclear program in an aerial campaign, and they all reach the same conclusion. You could set it back a little bit. Most of the estimates were like 6 to 9 months, which is what sort of played out after Operation Midnight Hammer. We didn't obliterate it. We set it back, and by the president's own admission, we set it back, I don't know how long ago June was, by like 6 months.
So you heard Matt Gutman, perhaps, but if you didn't, I'll summarize. Our correspondent in Tel Aviv talking about the Strait of Hormuz, where there were 3 attacks on tankers today. There are reports of efforts by the Iranians to mine it, or if not mine it, do something to directly attack any vessel that tries to go through the most narrow and shallow passageway in that strait. And we have some history in the United States of escorting vessels back in the 80s, but that was when Iran and Iraq were at war with each other, and Iran really wasn't trying to stop anything at the Strait of Hormuz. Clearly, it now wants to stop things there. This seems to me to be problematic, to put it mildly.
Yes, Major, it does. And basically what it means is the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. Might some civilian tankers and other ships be able to get through with an escort? Yeah, they might. None of them are going to want to take that chance. So it is effectively shut down. And again, that's another, side effect of this war that wasn't sufficiently calculated. And I think Representative Bacon summed it up pretty well. Iran has done a lot of bad things. And I don't disagree with that. The lesson we should have learned from the last 25 years is just because a leader in a country is doing a lot of bad things, to then assume that war is the answer to that there is a military solution to solve the problem and make things better. That is not the case, and I don't think it's the case here either. I think there are other ways to contain Iran, not to eliminate the threat. But again, this isn't eliminating the threat either. It's just reducing it at a very, very high cost.
When you speak of high costs, what are your constituents telling you, and how much do you think they should brace for higher gas prices and everything inflationary that comes with that?
Well, they've already seen it. They've already seen gas prices, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's like go up somewhere between 20 and in some cases as high as 50%. And you are quite correct. The other thing about gas prices is they're so connected to everything else because you ship products. Gas prices go up, the cost of business goes up pretty much everywhere. The cost of energy is a huge part of many businesses and an enormous part of some, so it's going to drive it up. But also, there's a lot of other business that goes on in the Middle East that has been totally disrupted. Fertilizer, a lot of fertilizer comes out of the Middle East and is shipped through there, which is going to have a huge effect on food prices. Now, I mean, there are estimates that this war continues, and I don't know how much longer, but it's certainly if it continues for more weeks and months. One estimate was that global GDP would see a 2% dip. I mean, that is a huge impact on the economy. And again, by Congressman Bacon's own admission, we don't seem to have a plan for actually bringing about either regime change or a fundamental shift in the approach of whatever regime remains. So I think I don't think we should have started the war, and I think we should stop it as soon as possible.
Washington Democrat Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Always a pleasure. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Major.
20% of the world's oil flows through what we're just talking about, Strait of Hormuz. Tankers are stalled both sides of that narrow choke point. Also, we were talking about that is, as Adam Smith just mentioned, rattling oil markets. Reserves will be tapped globally soon to compensate. More on that move next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. As my colleague Matt Gutman pointed out, something really important happened today. Iran struck 3 cargo ships, tankers, vessels earlier today, Strait of Hormuz, including this Thailand-registered vessel. And that underscores the dangers in the Strait of Hormuz and why no vessels really are moving, either to take the oil they have in there or to get some so they can go on the way back. Mike Summers joins me now. He's been on the program before. Happy to have him here, President and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. You should know that's the largest trade association representing all aspects of America's natural gas and oil industry. So this is a problem. I saw you on another network yesterday saying this might be the nightmare scenario of the last 30 years.
It is a nightmare scenario for world energy. If you think about the fact that about 20 million barrels of oil go through the Strait every single day, it's not just oil, it's also liquefied natural gas, it's fertilizer, it's potable water. This is a real crisis for the world, and we have to get the Strait open as quickly as possible.
The Economist magazine, it calls itself a newspaper, wrote today that it is this part that is choked off right now is narrow, shallow, there's low visibility, and it is a death trap if there's any hostile activity there. It is vulnerable to mines, guns, RPGs, which are possibly there, and fast boats, all of which Iran has still. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. It's advertised as about 20 miles wide. But the truth of the matter is that the shipping lanes are actually much shorter than that. And Iran does continue to have capabilities.
And it doesn't take much to wound or harass these vessels.
Well, that's exactly right. And if what their strategy is right now is to target a handful of these vessels every single day, and that will keep all vessels out of the Strait, it has to be the top priority of the U.S. military after they clear out the targets in Iran to protect the Strait of Hormuz. The world economy really depends on it.
What does that look like, though, Mike?
Well, what it means is that they're going to have to start targeting some of these smaller vessels, some of these gunboats that they're using right now. We need to get it clear, or the world economy could be in very deep peril.
So here's some numbers that I also read in The Economist, because I like to quote my sources. Before February 28th, before this war began, an average of 76 tankers per day. Now less than 5, and really it's sometimes not even 1, right?
That's right. But remember, there are some alternatives here. Saudi Arabia has built a major
huge pipeline.
The East-West pipeline, which goes across Saudi Arabia, can transport about 5 million barrels of oil a day. UAE has also built a pipeline that provides some relief. The United States, by the way, is the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world right now. We're providing a buffer to the world in terms of the supply that we're delivering to market. If you think if this thing had happened in 2005, for example, when the United States was only producing about 5 million barrels of oil a day, rather than record numbers at 13.7 million barrels of oil a day, we would not be able to handle this from an economic perspective. It has provided insurance from a geopolitical perspective for the United States of America.
Headline today, International Energy Agency's 32 member countries agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil. Will that help?
This is an appropriate first step. They said 400 million barrels of oil that the release is going to be. That's about 7 million a day from our estimation, just in terms of how much.
And it's not starting tomorrow. It's going to take a while.
It's going to take a while, and they haven't announced when. So this will happen in tranches. We think the most that they can do is about 7 million barrels every single day. That will provide some stability to oil markets, but it's still not enough. There's no replacing the 20 million barrels of oil that go through the Straits of Hormuz, and it has to be solved as quickly as possible.
Are analysts who said we could see $150 or $200 per barrel oil hysterical?
We just don't know at this point. It depends on how
it's traded today at 87.8 for West Texas Intermediate, 92.20 for Brent.
We just don't know how high it can go at this point. It depends on the duration and, of course, the seriousness of the situation. We know how serious this is right now. We just don't know how long it's going to go.
Does it surprise you the administration seems surprised?
No. I mean, I think they understood how deep this could go. We talk to them almost every single day. They know how important of an artery the Strait of Hormuz is right now. They have very smart people, including the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Energy, who are advising them, and some of the best generals in the world, of course, telling them how difficult this was going to be. I think what the president's calculation is that this is short-term pain for long-term gain. A nuclear-armed Iran would have been much worse for global oil stability.
But to use an 80s term, probably some gnarly days ahead. Mike Summers, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Trump obsession with the 2020 election. You remember that was the one he lost fair and square, legally verified 100 times, if not more? Well, this stalling legislation this year on Capitol Hill, and it's injected uncertainty into the midterms. More on all that when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. A man who needs no introduction, Scott MacFarlane, our justice correspondent. Let's talk about the president's, and this is a fair word, obsession. He's just made it clear that he is going to try to break the back of Senate Republicans over this so-called Save America Act, even though the votes aren't there and Senate Republican leadership keeps telling the White House the votes aren't there. Pick it up from there, Scott.
It's an onerous bill. That's why it's not going to get the Democratic support it needs.
Senator Fetterman, who's inclined to support half of it, just sat here this afternoon and said, I can't do the transgender and other things. They're just politicizing it all.
It prescribes way too much, especially for elections that are locally run and regulated by states. So put aside the reality, that bill's not going to happen. I think what critics of the president have been trying to argue as this vote approaches in the Senate is just having the debate, talking about the Save America Act could have an impact on post-election challenge seating, planning those seats now by calling into question the results in advance by saying you didn't pass that Save America Act, so we can't trust the results.
But you know and I do, because there are academic studies and there's even a Heritage Foundation study that illustrates how rare non-citizen voting in federal election is. Infinitesimally small.
That hasn't stopped, I think, this ongoing argument. It is a kinetic ongoing argument that voter fraud is not only happening, but poised to happen this year. And that's the relevant part, right? Is it poised to happen this year? That makes it easier to foment those post-election challenges, which were not well fomented in 2020.
Right. And yet, we're still going back to 2020, new jurisdiction, Arizona.
Maricopa County is the latest to go under scrutiny. This is a little bit different. What has happened here is the feds have subpoenaed the state's own audit, the Republican-led audit from Arizona.
Right.
So not so much the voting ballots, not so much the election paperwork, but the audit of the paperwork. I think they're ringing a bell that can't be unrung. It does sow seeds of doubt, whether justified or not.
An audit overseen by conservative Republicans in Maricopa County.
As we close here, let me just mention one thing. The Democratic National Committee is trying to push back on this. They have sued under the Freedom of Information Act for all the records the Trump administration may or may not have about deploying ICE agents to the polls in not just Arizona and Fulton County, Georgia, but across the country. It's a tough FOIA, but they're asking for it.
30 seconds. January 6th plaque. Catch my audience up on that.
It's up finally. It was done over the weekend, to the surprise of the police, but they're still suing to move it. It's kind of hidden in a basement, and the police say that doesn't follow the law.
And it was put up this weekend at 4 in the morning?
That's when the laborers tend to do their work, but the police don't like being caught flat-footed.
No, indeed, they're not. Scott MacFarlane, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here, sir. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I mean it. This is The Takeout. I mean that, too. This part, really. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, just occasionally clever. The Daily Report coming your way next.